Good evening, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to our general plan update workshop this evening. If I could have the masses in the crowd just quiet down a little bit and so that everyone can hear what's going on. I'd like to thank everyone who's here this evening, the few, the proud, the brave. You've made it through the heat and through the convention center parking lot here this evening. So we do appreciate you coming out to this workshop and joining us this evening. Your comments and your input on the general plan is very important to us, and so we're very happy to have your participation. In addition to those of you who are here in the convention center, we have a number of residents who've joined us on Facebook Live this evening. And so we have people who are at home watching this, and will also be able to participate in the question and answer session that we'll have as part of our presentation this evening. So we welcome everyone who is also joining us via Facebook Live. I do want to say that we do have interpreters here for either sign language or for Spanish. So if there's anyone here who needs the benefit of an interpreter, we do have those services available, and so we thank our interpreters for being here this evening as well. So again, if you do need the assistance of those services, please let us know, and we'll be able to help you out there. I would like to introduce Wendy Novak and Jonathan Netler from PlaceWorks. They are the team members from our consulting group. They will be leading the workshop this evening. Before I turn the time over to them, I have a little bit of background that I'd like to go through with you. We kicked off this general plan update process for a number of reasons. Back in 2016, we started looking at the city's Plan Development District Ordinance. We made some changes to that, but there's a lot of references to that in the general plan. And so the Planning Commission and the subcommittee who was looking at that said, you know, it's about time that we update our general plan. In addition, we have the housing element that the state requires us to update every 8 years. And so looking at that, it became apparent that we also needed to update the city's housing element. In addition, the last time we updated the full general plan document was back in 2007. So it's been 14 years since we looked at our general plan. Things have changed a little bit in Palm Springs since that time, and so we think it's time to look at the general plan and update it for the conditions that we face today. We started this project back in late 2018, going through, looking for a consultant, and we kicked off with our first workshop in February of 2020. How many of you were here for that workshop back then? Okay, a couple of hands. You know, we got off to a great start, we had some great input, and then something happened in the world which put a little pause on our ability to do outreach with the general plan. So while we scaled back a bit, we stayed at home, we still worked on a number of things related to the general plan, but it was difficult to go out into the community and get input from our residents, from our property owners, from our businesses. And so we kind of put things on hold for a while. We're back. We remember what you told us back in February of 2020, and we are incorporating those comments still as we look at updating the general plan. We did a number of things online. I hope some of you had the opportunity to participate in that as well. And then last month, in support of our housing element update, we were finally able to get back out into neighborhoods and reach out to our residents and chat with them about what their hopes and expectations are for housing here in the city of Palm Springs. So we're glad to be back. We're glad that you are back with us. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our consultants. Wendy, thank you.
Hi, everybody. It was nice to see the hands that you guys are still hanging out with us. We appreciate that very much. And then it was funny because I was looking, and you'll see there's a picture later. Apparently, I have a thing with blue and white polka dot dresses because it's not the same dress, but it's a similar one when I was up here last time. So it's almost like we had a year that just kind of disappeared, and we're starting back from where we were. So tonight, we'll go over a few things with you, and I hope you don't mind. Because I got folks over here, I'll walk over here a little bit, and I'll roam around. But the overall intent of tonight's workshop is to provide you an overview with what's happened, where have we been since the last time we met. So we'll do a brief presentation on that, and then we've saved some time, about 15 minutes. Well, I take that back. We'll go through the presentation, then I will do a bit of an overview on the online tool that we have, because we recognize that a lot of people are participating from home or may not have been able to make it this evening. So we want to make sure that everyone has opportunity, or if you have ideas that you think of after tonight's meeting, that you have a space to provide that input to us. And then we'll do a little bit of a Q&A after, about 15 minutes. And if you guys have questions you want to ask of us, we have everyone here, city staff, us, about the process, anything about the changes you're hearing about. We'll also be able to take questions from those that are participating on Facebook Live. And so those that are participating online, we ask them to ask questions there, but if they're providing comments, to make sure you do that on the website that we'll go to, because that's where we're gathering all the feedback. So we talked a little bit about, we'll do an overview of the status of the project. We'll talk a little bit about the vision statement and how that's evolved in the past year. We'll touch on the housing element, some changes to the land use definitions and descriptions and the map, and then what that means for the overall build-out projections for the city. So we have to look at what that will look like if the city was fully built out, what those numbers look like. And then we'll talk about next steps. So I think Flynn pretty much touched upon why we're updating. So I don't think I need to go over that again. It's mainly the update for the admin language changes for the Plan Development District, and then to respond to the housing element. And this is an exhibit that shows kind of where we are in the update process. A general plan update usually takes about 2 years. By the time we do the community outreach, we come up with a land plan, draft goals and policies, have that reviewed by the community, and then do all the environmental review. So since we had to put everything on hold, are kind of midway through this process. And what happens at this point is we arrive at a land plan that we are studying. So what you will find is that after this workshop, we have a planning commission meeting scheduled for the 21st and one council meeting scheduled for the 22nd, so in short order, so that they can give us input on the land plan. And from there, what we will do is take that land plan that they authorize and we'll study it in the environmental document. So it's not an approval of the plan, but it's them giving us the okay to start the technical studies for traffic and noise and air quality, because we don't want to have to do those analyses 2 times if things start to change. So we won't see full adoption of the plan until April of 2022. So we still got some time, and there are plenty of opportunities for you to weigh in and continue to give feedback. This is an evolving process that always includes the community. We had many opportunities, like I said, to do outreach and to connect with all of you. So we've had community workshops, we've had online surveys related to the vision statement. We looked at some of the key themes that were important to you all, and we've been meeting with the General Plan Steering Committee. So they've been helping us work through some of these ideas and interpreting what they hear from the community as to how the plan should be shaped. Moving forward, I mentioned we'll be going to Planning Commission and City Council, and then we will be drafting the revised goals and policies for the land use element and the circulation plan. We'll also be drafting revised policies for the safety element as well. And then we'll do we've been doing some additional outreach on housing and environmental justice, and I'll talk a little bit about that more when I talk about the housing element. So a little bit on the vision statement. Way back when, in February 2020, man, we snuck that one in right before we couldn't do it, right? We came to you guys, and obviously those of you that have been here, we had an opportunity to comment on the vision statement, and we had stations where you could comment on traffic, open space, other things. And so we got some feedback about revised vision and priorities. We also got additional feedback from the General Plan Steering Committee. And so what you will see on the wall in the back is kind of the revised statement where it stands now. We had about 55 of you attend, and we had a lot of people hear about it a bunch of different ways. We're always curious about the best way to get the word out, so keep us apprised of what works best for you. We had a ton of participants online that provided feedback. We had about almost 900 comments about the vision. And so as you can see, the vision has become a statement that's really important to the community, and we're really looking to see what that should be now. We started because it was an administrative update and kind of revising the vision that was there back in 2007. But I think the feedback from the City Council has been, let's make sure, because this is a plan for us through 2040, that we're thinking broadly enough about that vision. And we've made some additions and refinements to the vision, which I'll talk about in a minute. There were some language changes. Some people were okay with the vision the way that it was, but we also got some feedback that there was some language in there that didn't resonate with people. There was a strong feeling that the vision should reflect that the city focuses on residents first and then visitors second. So we're refining that language. You'll see some in there, some refined language about that. Obviously, tourism is an important part of the community, but that priority on residents was heard as part of the feedback. We also heard a lot of interest about equity and inclusion and making sure that's represented in the vision as well. We're still asking for comments and feedback. The council really wants to think big on that vision. So we have it again for you tonight. If you want to provide additional feedback looking at where it's going, if there's something we're missing, let us know. We want to hear it, and we'll share that information with them. I don't know. I think you guys can probably read the vision statement in the back, but we talk about that inclusivity. We talk about the importance of architectural and historical and cultural. This is a very culturally rich community. Looking at the diversity and equity and unity, and also providing appropriate public services. But is there anything else missing? Do we need to call things out that, thinking forward, what do you guys really want to be? And if this hits it on the nail on the head, that's fine too, but we still have the door open that if there's other things we're missing, we'd love to hear from you. So let's talk a little bit about the housing element, because that really started to come to the forefront as we were updating the general plan. All cities are required to have an updated and a housing element, period, but we're in the cycle where everybody is updating them. You'll find that most cities you talk to need to get their element in by October of this year. So there's a kind of a mad rush for all cities to start looking at their land plans and make sure they're planning for the appropriate housing. We look at, in a housing element, you've got the housing supply, what kind of quality and maintenance on the housing, how affordable it is. Do you have access for all sorts of ages and people with disabilities? This housing element is special. It's a little bit different than the other elements of the general plan in that it is reviewed by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. So while the council adopts all of the elements, this one in particular is reviewed by the state to make sure that you are meeting your housing requirements. And so that deadline is October, but there is a kind of a grace period that people have a 120-day grace period, so you can kind of go into early next year as you're working through the edits to the element. So we look at the housing needs, like what does the community need? What are the constraints to getting housing in Palm Springs? What kind of inventory do you already have? What is here and what is missing? Establishing goals and policies like you do for all of the other elements, and then creating those programs to ensure that you're taking the steps to move forward to provide adequate housing for all life stages and lifestyles in the city. So let's take a look at kind of the snapshot of Palm Springs housing situation. You know, we have an aging population here that's in need of affordable housing and assisted living. There's kind of a missing middle, that we call it, of, you know, younger families right now that are having a hard time finding a place to purchase or rent. There are some needs for your special needs folks, dependent on age, their income, their household type, and disability. And then what we're finding is that there is a strong interest in condominium development in the city, but then that doesn't necessarily address some of these other needs that are coming up from the community. So we have to look at how we balance all of that. So how do we meet the requirements? So we know we have these needs. We also have the state establishes certain housing numbers that the city needs to show that they are planning for. That doesn't mean they have to build them, but they have to plan for them, and they have to plan for them at different allocations of income levels. And so what we look at is vacant sites. So where are there properties that can accommodate the new housing and that have the infrastructure to accommodate the housing? Looking at how you guys look at accessory dwelling units. So those are the granny flat kind of things. So there's second units that are like in the back. Smaller usually, which ones are already there and which ones are permitted in the future. So what does that look like for your growth trajectory? And then we had to look at how many units that accommodated, and then where are we? We were still short a few units of meeting the numbers that the state gave us. So we needed to look at redesignating a few properties to be able to count for those. And I'll show you what some of those changes are later when we go through the examples of area of change on the land use map. I know Flynn already alluded to this. The city just recently, at the direction of council, had gone out and done some neighborhood listening sessions. And it primarily focused on housing. That was the original prompt to go out to the community. But we also wanted to, again, like we're doing with you tonight, get some input, opportunities to provide input on the vision. And then also to look at other things like environmental justice. So if you have access to transit, or you're looking at compatibility between uses and those sorts of things. So we were getting some comments from those kind of the big ideas from those meetings. We're looking at, okay, there's high cost of housing. It's nothing that's going to surprise you guys, I don't think. High cost of housing, lack of affordable housing, you know, looking at the rent increases, the substandard housing. So how do we get housing that's maintained? How do we work with those property owners to make sure that you know, the quality of the housing that's here is adequate? And then you know, just looking at people having challenges becoming homeowners, period. So if they're challenged with, you know, debt or other things. So those are some of the things we heard feedback on. And then all of that helps us to inform the general plan land uses, of course. So now what does this mean for the timing of the housing element? And because it's a little bit special, because we have these requirements from the state and that October timeline, it moves with the general plan, but kind of has a parallel process. It kind of branches off a little bit. So as we're talking about the land plan and these changes, the housing element is already drafted and it goes to HCD, Housing and Community Development, for their review. After Planning Commission and Council provide direction on the 21st and 22nd, we will go ahead and submit that draft to HCD for their review so we can meet those state mandated timelines. In the meantime, we'll keep working with the steering committee to develop the goals and policies for the land use element and the circulation element. While that one's kind of moving along its own separate path, but we'll come back around when we go for full adoption. So we should hopefully hear back in 60 days, comments from the state on that. So you might hear some feedback and see some additional changes depending on what they say. So I'm trying to see if I'm missing anything here. So we're looking at the 60-day review coming up, and then we just wait. We wait for the comments and then hopefully get our revised draft to HCD in October, and then spring of next year, early January, because we don't want to do any hearings probably in December, we'll be taking that to council for their direction. So they'll give a blessing on the housing element and then the land plan too. We're trying to take it all at the same time. So let's talk a little bit about the land use definitions and descriptions. So another part of our charge to update this focused general plan was to take a look at some of those definitions that needed a little bit of refinement. And we got some feedback from the steering committee about some edits that should be changed or be made to the existing definitions. And so, as Flynn mentioned earlier, there were some references to the planned development district that were in the general plan that are being removed. We had looked at some areas since the general plan was last adopted in 2007. As you can imagine, there's little administrative tweaks of things that staff could see. So we were looking at making those things consistent. And then looking at how we can streamline approval of residential uses, especially in the tourist resort commercial areas, and looking at ways to accommodate rebuilding and remodeling of small hotel resort commercial areas, because there were some things that weren't quite matching up there. It was kind of a challenge to do some rebuilding in there because of the way that the language was written. Of course, we are trying to encourage affordable housing production, especially in the CBD and mixed use areas. And then we have some updates when the current general plan has mixed use areas, and it has kind of the target range of mix of uses. So it might say a certain percentage of commercial, a certain percentage of residential is kind of the target mix for that area. There were refinements to those definitions based upon things that have either developed over the past several years or a new role that that area plays now. And so they were adjusted for those things. So that's kind of the definitions, and we have copies of those on the table, so you can see the red line of the strike through of what's changed and what's been kept. So we can give those to you, and they will also be online for those folks that are watching at home. The map, the general plan map, is another component that we obviously looked at, and that's usually probably the thing that most people are familiar with. I think anybody that works on land use goes to the map first, probably. And so on our map, we had also have some administrative changes. So as you can imagine, over time, the tools we use actually get better. So we use GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, with mapping. And so we have more accurate information from the assessor's office, so parcels, and we had designations for, let's say, floodways or other things that we had to hand draw on before. Now we can more clearly match them with the parcels and where they're located. So you'll find some administrative changes like that. You'll look at, if there was a vacated street or other things that were cleanup. We looked at the Section 14 specific plan was adopted, and so there were some inconsistencies with the general plan, so those were made to match. And then we have some new land use changes that were predominantly prompted by the housing element update, where if we had, for instance, a mixed use designation, so it would show purple as the mixed use, but if we needed to have a certain number or certain acreage of the property reflect as straightforward housing for our housing element, there's a couple areas in the mixed use that were designated as just straightforward residential. And it doesn't veer too far from where the mixed use was going anyway, but it explicitly now calls out those parcels for housing versus mixed use. So it matches the intent, but now we can show HCD with certainty that that's the type of use that will go in there. And then we had some certain things like the College of the Desert relocated, so we've got new land uses on the old site as well. So all of those are on the map and back, and you will see that there is an updated land use map, and it has blue boxes around the areas that have changed. And then we have an areas of change map, which just pulls out solely those parcels that are changing. So as Flynn mentioned, this was a focused update. The direction when we initiated this update was not to do a whole comprehensive update of the plan. However, we're always open to hearing comments, and we did receive some others for areas that are outside these kind of areas of change, and I'll touch on those in a minute. So here's an example of, the open space area. It's an open space water where we are reflecting the new kind of boundaries to match where the actual flood zone is. Here's an example of the Section 14 specific plan where you can see some of the parcels, the existing parcels had some commercial and some other uses, and we modified those. This is the College Park specific plan, which is the former College of the Desert site, which showed kind of educational uses on the site. And so now the proposed plan is reflecting medium density residential, open space, which is already there, and some higher density residential along the corridor, and then some neighborhood commercial at the corner. This is the housing element, we call it the candidate site that we were talking about. That's at Palm Canyon and Via Olivera. It has residential uses around it. It is existing predominantly mixed use. That's what I was talking about, the purple area. And as we reflected the change for the housing element, you'll see that was straightforward now residential so that we could meet our housing requirements. And this was something, again, that was reviewed by the steering committee and was supported by them. So I mentioned there were a few other requests that were submitted from the public that are kind of outside of the focus areas that we are concentrating on. And there was one request at the I-10 and Whitewater area. There was one at Bel Air Greens, and then there was one for Desert Highland. And so these are going to be forwarded to the Planning Commission and Council for their direction as to whether or not those should be included in the plan at this point. And that will be discussed further on the 21st and 22nd, since that's a bigger purview than what our original scope was. So we'll hear from them as to how we should move forward with those requests. So if people do have comments on areas that are outside those focused areas, the areas of change that we talked about, we're always open to have those comments and hear them, but we will need to get direction from the decision makers about how that gets folded in this update at this point in time. So what does this mean for the bottom line numbers, what we call the build-out projections? As planners, we have to take the crystal ball and look at the land uses and try to understand what that means for total square footage of non-residential uses in the city, what that means for how many people are living here, how many units you will have. Every general plan is required to make build-out projections, and that they also help us plan for roads, parks, infrastructure, all of it. And we get our data on the projections from various sources, and we look at the census, the ACS, the American Community Survey. We get information from the assessor's office and the California Department of Finance, DOF. So we take all of these and establish a methodology. We have a very detailed methodology. If anybody wants to roll up their sleeves and dig into how all these numbers are put together, that's on the website. But I'm going to give you the high level, bottom line where we ended up today. What you will see in the overall changes and the numbers is that the changes that were made really demonstrate that commitment, the city's commitment to additional housing production and what's needed for the community to meet the housing requirements from HCD. We look at the new accessory dwelling unit production and account for that. We also have to, we have so many requirements as planners, but one of the other things we need to look at is what's called Senate Bill SB 330, and it's no net loss, which means back in 2018, that's our date that we look back to, the city cannot show less units in the general plan than what they had in 2018. So you couldn't decide you wanted all single family and effectively downzone all of your uses. You have to at least maintain whatever number that was at 2018. So we take a look at that and we make sure with all the changes that are happening that you haven't, whoa. I'm going to find myself falling through the floor. That will be entertaining for all of you. So we have to make sure, and that we meet it. It's not a problem, but that's one of the requirements we have to take a look at. So here is the summary. This is the summary slide. So what are we right now? What is Palm Springs? You've got 35,500 500 housing units, give or take a few. You've got 23,000 households. Your population's about 46,000 people. You have about 20 million square feet of non-residential square footage. So that includes commercial, office, industrial, some of your airport uses, so anything that's not a residential unit. And then you have about 28,000 jobs. Your current general plan, so the one from 2007, give or take, with some adjustments because there were amendments along the way, we had estimated 51,000 housing units, 48,000, give or take, households, almost 95,000 people. And as far as non-residential square footage, you were at about 34 million square feet. And then the jobs were 56. So you can start to see that the population, essentially starts to, and your units almost, no, they don't double, but you have a significant increase if you were to be built out. Now, the proposed general plan, based upon the minor changes that we have been talking about, is not that much different when you look at kind of the delta, the change between what you had in 2007 and what you are proposing now, or what's being proposed now. And so you'll see an increase in housing units, which is about 3,000, give or take, 3,000 additional units. You've got a few more households, which is almost 3,000 more households, which is reflective of the additional units. Your population goes up. Your population is 2 point something, I can't remember, 2 point something per household on average. And so that would reflect, if you go up 6,000 people, that's about 2 people per household. And then you'll see your non-residential square footage goes down a little bit. You go down just shy of 1 million square feet and go down about 1,700 jobs. And that's just a reflection of the trade-off of the additional acreage that you guys have allocated straight to residential. Now, one of the things we wanted to just touch upon is that you will see that when we look at households and we look at occupancy, when you're looking at like, okay, how many people are here really? It's so big. Right now we have about 65% occupancy. So, some times of the year you've got people, there's not a lot of people here, but then other times of the year you guys are at full capacity. For the general plan, we have to look at that potential of what if we're planning for that, if you were fully occupied. Now, that doesn't mean we build infrastructure for fully occupied. You build infrastructure as you grow and the demand is there. But this, for our analysis, for what we need to look at for environmental review and other planning purposes, we look at it at that 95% occupancy. So what we plan for and how you guys actually evolve are kind of two different things. So that's kind of the difference between the two numbers and why you see it's so much larger. How are we doing? You guys still with me? All right. So now we're at the mapping activity, which to me is the fun part. If any of you have ever played SimCity, this is kind of Palm Springs' version of SimCity, but in real life. So what we wanted to do, because obviously it is never our goal to try to have public outreach meetings in the hottest times of the year, but because we are up against our housing element deadlines, we had to meet some of these timelines. So we're trying to make sure we have opportunities for everybody to engage. And so we've put together this mapping activity, and it's on Social Pinpoint. And we are going to be taking, I'll kind of give you an overview. If I can drive this machine the right way, I'll be able to pull up the tool, and I can show you what it looks like. But we're taking comments until the 18th. So we've got about a week to do that because we need a couple days so that we can review all the comments and summarize them and be ready for Planning Commission on the 21st and Council on the 22nd. So we're giving you as much time as we can so that we can get as many comments as possible. So please share this link. It will be online, and also if you don't want to have to write all of this down, we have web cards, the little business cards that are on the table in the back. If you just go to, what was it? Now I'm forgetting our website. PS Palm Springs. PS General Plan, thank you. Like all the things I'm trying to remember, I can't even remember the website. The PS General Plan. there will be a link there. So if you don't want to have to remember that tonight, just grab one of the web cards and it will be right there and it should come up. But in the meantime, what I will do is pull this up. I'm going to set these down for a sec and share with you what this website looks like. So when you go to the online tool, you'll get a kind of an introduction. It tells you almost exactly what I told you now, how long the survey is open, what the purpose of the survey is. How am I doing? Oh, it's not showing? I'm glad you're watching. I'm just running. Nobody's saying anything. They're like, what are we looking at? All right, so that's what I was talking about. You get the same intro. And so when you're able to click through, get started, you will see a copy of the map. You will see all these areas in blue are highlighted. Those are the proposed areas of change. Everything else is staying the same. This will give you an overview of what the colors on the map mean, what the legend is. And this one, it's really hard to read here, but you can zoom in on it. This is the table that each one of these areas is numbered, and it will tell you what the change is and what it's going to and from. So it'll tell you if it's an administrative change, it will tell you if it's a new change, that sort of thing. So you'll be able to take a look at that. You can come over and zoom in on the map, and then you will be able to click on one of these comments, see if I can do this, and drag it over to the map. So if you like the land use, you drag it over to the map, and you drop the pin down, you can leave your comment and go forward from there. So what we have are options to say you like the land use as being proposed, so you can help us know if you're supporting it. You would like to change the land use that we're showing, or you have a suggestion. So overall, you can comment anywhere on the map, but our goal is going to be focusing on those areas in blue because those were the areas of change. We'll look at the other ones and see what comes up, and if we have the opportunity, we'll share that with Planning Commission and Council. But I will also show you the tools on the side here. If you click on this eye, this will give you that same pop-up screen that came up when you first landed on the page. So that's that same information. This tab here will show instructions on how to comment on the map. We also have a question over here. So if you don't want to comment tonight on the vision statement, this is your opportunity to say, does the statement as revised through the process so far, does it currently reflect, what your vision is and accurately capture what the vision should be for Palm Springs in 2040? If yes, you can click the yes button. If no, then there's a space for you to tell us what additional comments and things should be added. This button will give you an overview of the proposed land use changes. So it talks about some of the changes that have been made, and there are links to the proposed land use plan, the maps to the areas of change, and all the things that you see tonight. Those are all here. So you can have a downloadable 11 by 17 of that. It will also be on the city's website. The build out that we talked about is also here, so you can click on that detailed methodology if you want to really delve into all the specifics on the methodology of how we came up with the build out, or you can look at the table that I just went over from the PowerPoint show. That's included here as well, and if you click on the image, it will enlarge. And then I'm trying to see if I'm missing anything else. Looks like, is that it, Jonathan? Oh, the text changes. I'm like, I'm not sure why it's not going. Oh, there we go. Thank you. All right, and so I mentioned the definitions that we redlined, some of the changes to the text, the definitions of what the land uses are. Those are included here. So what you'll find is if you click on one of these, it will take you to the red lines, so it's all there. It should all be in one place. We're trying to make it easy. But if you find that you're having a challenge pulling up any of this stuff, please let us know and we'll help navigate that. So I think that's it. And I think staff, David, you'll be sharing the social pinpoint link with our watchers on, or it's already happening? Okay, so anybody can go in. If you wanted to right now, you can grab your phone and click on that link and start adding comments. So feel free. So now we'll go back to the show. And that's really it at this point for the overview. I think at this point we said we would open it up to if there are just general questions that anyone has. You don't have to ask them now. We'll be available in the back as well. So if you just want to have a one-on-one, we can do that too. I see a question over here.
Can you tell me, maybe because I had missed something, in the blues that you're talking about changes, what were the changes or the proposed changes in the airport?
So in the blue areas, the question was in the areas that were, yeah, I'm repeating right now, that's what I was gonna say. The question was, in the blue areas that are outlined, what specifically was the blue change at the airport? And I don't have that one up. David, do you know? We'll put a, Jonathan, do you know? Oh, it was just roadways. Oh, that's right. We had some vacated roadways that weren't there anymore. So it wasn't an actual change of the land use. It was, we had a road that was vacated, and so now we're reflecting that in the designation. So we can take a look at that, Shay. So the blue changes are kind of city-wide. So if I pull up that map, there's areas all over. So it's not just there's like a little change at the airport. There was some, when I was talking about the mix, at the airport, it should be all roads, but not citywide. Citywide, there's some mixed-use land use changes. We, when we looked at the mixed-use designations that were down in the south, and it was, what was it, Smoke Tree, and what was the new one that we created? Okay, Palm Canyon East. When you look at the old general plan, Smoke Tree had a bunch of properties that were kind of disconnected along the corridor. And so one of the suggestions was, and we can show it to you, to group that and define that as like Smoke Tree, and then there's a gateway entrance. So we kind of defined that a little bit better and had it play its own role. So they're minor refinements, so we can go over that with you, but they're not significant land use changes on that. I see a question over here. So the question is, why isn't there consideration for open space? It seems like you're taking open space away and adding more residential. In this case, we're not changing any of the open space designations. We do have to plan for open space. In this case, what we were looking at for the housing that's there is existing areas that already had a mixed use designation and that allowed for housing. One of the things that's interesting about a general plan overall, because this is a focus update and we are not open space, the open space element was not one of the elements that was part of the update at this time. The interesting thing about a general plan is that we can't just put an open space designation on a property because it becomes a taking, unless we can show that it's either being purchased, it's city land. So we can identify in a general plan general areas that are short of open space that the city could look to in the future to try to find additional open space in those areas. But we can't just put green designations on a map because that would take away the land use from that property owner. But there are requirements that you have to have 3 acres, or are you guys 3 or 5 acres per thousand? You're 5. Okay, so Palm Springs has 5 acres per 1,000 people. So every time we look at population, we need to make sure that there's open space provided for them. So the question is wasn't Bel Air Greens originally open space? And do you guys want to address that one? Because we're not, right now, we haven't made any changes to that area, correct? Yeah. Right.
The land use plan in 2007 designated as open space. That's not changed at this time.
Okay.
Council might consider it.
So the land use plan in 2007 designates the area as open space, and so the council could give us different direction, but we haven't changed any of that in that area. Well, perhaps we could look at the map and go through it and make sure we have it correct and see which areas we're looking at after the presentation, so that we can pull it up the specific one. Okay.
There's a Facebook question.
Okay. I'm holding for a Facebook question right now.
There's this question about extending the deadline. It seems like a very short short time frame? So that's the question.
So the question was, yeah, extending the deadline for comments. Overall, I understand it's a short time frame and turnaround for a week. We're trying to get as many comments in by the 18th as possible, because you can imagine we've got to review them all and provide an overview to staff. If people have an exception where they can get it to us, a day after, we're not going to turn away comments, but to the degree that anybody can get those in to us by the 18th, that would really help us out. Flynn?
Also, if you just remind folks that the changes that we're looking at are primarily related to the housing element, but we will still be reviewing changes to the land use element in the fall at public workshops.
Okay. So the changes right now that we're looking at will be predominantly for the housing element, so to make sure we satisfy those requirements. But we still have opportunities to review the land use map in the fall as well. So this isn't the end-all be-all, it's just what we start to study, and then this has to come back to hearing to Planning Commission and Council again. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for people to provide feedback on the plan. I saw a question over here, and then I'll come over there.
How are you dealing with identifying areas where the general plan may be different than zoning?
That's a good question. So, okay, the question was, how are you identifying areas where the general plan may be different than zoning? So at this point in time, we are just looking at the general plan as a whole. If there are areas that differ, the zoning needs to match the general plan. So we're starting with the general plan, period. Here's what we have. This was the direction of the general plan. And then once we get feedback on that, as part of the process, it's usually at the end after council has given us direction on the plan, we go through and we do kind of a zoning consistency review to see where some of those properties don't match.
So, in the previous general plan, 2007 plan, those areas were not identified, and it became an issue. And there are some of those now, too, that I saw up on the screen. But I think it's what you've done with the blue outlines here and the areas. I didn't see that in the previous general plan. It certainly works very, very well in looking at the plan. But I think, so is there going to be a document that will deal with the conflicts between the proposed general plan and the zoning, not only currently, not only in the future, I mean, but currently, that outline those areas?
At this point, we don't normally we look at the general plan first and say, this is what we want the vision to be. The next step the city usually takes is that consistency analysis and then decides whether or not they want to update. I mean, you have to update the zoning. Flynn, do you want to add in on that? Because normally the zoning updates come after, and they should be made consistent with the general plan. So we start with that general plan land use.
So to respond to that question, that's been a frustration of mine as well. When I came to the city of Palm Springs in 2014 and started to discover some of these discrepancies, it creates a number of headaches, not only for property owners, but also for staff. So as part of the completion of the general plan, that's what staff intends to do, is to follow up where there are discrepancies and correct those through a change of zone process where that may be necessary. And that is a public hearing process that we would go through. But yes, that is what we intend to do at the completion and adoption of the general plan, is to follow up on any discrepancies. So thank you for bringing that up.
Along that line, so will the discrepancies be shown during the general plan process? And I understand about changing the zoning afterwards, but my question is, prior to general plan process, will the Planning Commission Council see the discrepancies?
Probably as part of the adoption of the land use element, we as staff have already started our list of where there are discrepancies, And then looking at where there are changes to the land use map, we'll also have to identify those. So yes, that is the intent as part of the adoption of the land use element.
So the general plan drives what changes will be made. So we start with that. Whatever direction we get on the general plan will prompt what happens to the zoning. We don't look at the zoning and have that drive the general plan.
I fully understand that, but it wasn't done in 2007, and that's the problem.
Well, and I think you hear Flynn saying, yeah.
I
that-
agree. So I'm right there with you.
All right, we had a question over here. And then Flynn, David, do we have any more floating? Do I need to come back to you? Okay.
Hey, thanks. Two questions for you. One is on the redefinition of medium-density residential. The second sentence essentially completely changes the definition of residential to allow motels and hotels within a residential area. A medium-density residential area currently does not have that. And this affects probably an enormous number of neighborhoods in the city. What kind of study has been done to determine the effects that that would have on a medium-density residential neighborhood?
So the question is, there are language changes to the medium-density residential definition to allow hotels in that designation. Flynn and David, can you help? I don't remember that one, the details of that one specifically.
Yeah, I think it was just to reflect. So for the changes that we're looking at for the medium-density residential, that designation is 15 dwelling units to the acre. And so currently right now within our MDR designations, we know in fact that there are hotels that exist in the MDR. And so this is really to make sure that we're not excluding hotels where we currently have had hotels historically throughout the city. So it's to be more deliberate in how we're describing that designation.
I appreciate that, but doesn't it also open the door to building new hotels and motels within what is a traditionally residential neighborhood, which obviously is a big issue? Doesn't that open the door to this going forward?
I would say probably not, because most of the MDR designations are largely built out, but at the same time, the city currently in its R3 zoning district permits both hotels and residential. So it's not really going to change what is currently already permissible in our R3 districts, our zoning districts. It's really just to reflect that historically in R3, our zoning district, we've allowed both hotel and residential. But in 2007, when we did the comprehensive update, we, for whatever reason, decided not to have that explicit definition in that description. So currently, as I said, we currently have hotels permissible in that zone. So it's not, I don't think the intention is that we want to have more hotels in the R3 district. I think it's just really to show our R3 districts currently allow it. There's a number of hotels within the R3 district. The MDR designation needs to reflect that we have historically a lot of hotels in those districts. And it's not to really, there's no intention to show that we need more hotels in those MDR designations.
Just to follow up with that, if I may. So if I heard correctly, in 2007 or 3, there was language, and then language was excluded, and now language is being put back in.
Right.
And so there was a period of time when it was existing because it was pre-2007. And so one would think that the lack of moderate and affordable housing would compete with hotel and motel. And so it was left out, so we had no new development, it was only what was existing. And I think what I'm hearing in this conversation is that now you're opening it back up so new development could happen. And we went 12 years, or 13 years, 14 years, without any of that motel, hotel development. And now we're bringing it back in, thus jeopardizing the ability to jeopardizing more housing for residents.
So the comment was, to recap the conversation we just had, and that pre-2007, the city's general plan allowed hotel and residential in the MDR designation, or whatever the designation was pre-2007. And so now with the update in 2007 that we did not explicitly identify hotels as a permissible land use. And then, so there was a period of time for that 12 or 15-year period, wherever we are from 2007 to now, where we weren't explicitly allowing hotels in that designation. And I think this partially goes back to what the Director Fagg was saying about the hotel or the city's general plan not being lined up with the zoning. So the R3 zoning never changed between 2007, 2015, or now, or even pre-2007. It's always been within that R3 zoning, which is the zone that aligns with the medium density land use designation of the general plan, has always been a permissible zone, a zone that permits hotel and residential. So going back to the same frustrations that we've been experiencing for a number of years, while the general plan has not been specific in identifying hotels, the underlying zoning has always permitted hotels historically, and it continues to permit hotels today. So the zoning is what we use to implement the general plan. And so because it was silent, and there was no specific, as far as we knew, intention to exclude hotels, that was never changed since 2007. So that's really kind of the background on why we assumed that was, it was never taken out. It was never taken out of the zoning, but we don't know for certain. And this is really just to clean up the language to understand that there are a number of hotels in the Historic Tennis Club, various locations throughout the city that have had hotels, small hotels, and in other various locations that can continue to be operated as hotels, and the intention is not to make those locations non-conforming. It's not really, I should say, it's not really the intention to incentivize hotel development in the MDR designation. It's to show that historically where we've had those hotels, they can continue for the smaller hotel areas.
Do we have more comments? A question? Do we know offhand what size lot, what size lot is at 15 per acre? Well, we can, like a particular project at 15? Uh-huh. Well, it would be an acre. It would be an acre in size, but it's 15 units would fit on that. Or if you had less than an acre, then you would scale that down. So it would, and maybe I'm missing that.
So you're asking in terms of if you had single family at 15 units per acre, you wouldn't see that. Typically at 15 units to the acre, it's going to be a multifamily property. There are regulations in the zoning code in terms of what is the minimum size for a multifamily property based on the zone district. Typically, it starts at about 20,000 square feet and goes up from there. But at 15 units to the acre, you would not see a single-family product on individual lots. You'll see that in the lower densities. Currently in the city's zoning code, 5,000 square feet is the minimum lot size in the smallest single-family zone district.
Thanks, Flynn. All right, looks like we have a Facebook Live question.
Yeah. Why is the College of the Desert new site, Farrell and Bristol, designated mixed use instead of school?
So the question is, why is the College of the Desert site, the new site at Farrell, designated mixed use instead of school? And it's a mixed use because it's actually mixed use that allows for some educational uses, some office uses, there's some room for, I believe we had, if there were restaurant uses maybe associated with the college, if they were going to be doing some other types of things. So the mixing there is not a mix that includes residential. It's a mix of all the other non-residential type uses. All right. I have another question in the back.
Yeah, as part of the general plan, I wonder if the Weston settlement properties were looked at and viewed and what
Okay, great. I think Flynn can take that. And do you want to repeat the question for everybody too?
So the question was relative to the properties that the city received in the settlement with Grit Development. There's a number of properties throughout the city, including properties in the Little Tuscany neighborhood, on East Palm Canyon, et cetera. The city has not made any determination on those yet. There is interest in both housing and open space for those properties. That's something that would come before the city council as part of the discussions on the update to the land use element that will be coming up this fall and the following spring. So I think the city council would be interested in hearing the input of the public on those properties. And so as you're using our map tool, perfect opportunity to comment on those. So please do that.
All right, I think we're going to do last call for big questions like this. If anybody has any others. If not, and then, I was going to do last call on Facebook too. So apparently,
It's a long
okay.
one. It might be better to have that one addressed on.
Okay, give me a second. This is, like, I feel like this one needs a, I don't, okay. There are some explicit suggestions here about some other changes to El Dorado and Frontage Road, C1 to mixed use and not neighborhood commercial. And so the question is, can we make that rezoning change? If I could suggest that perhaps you make that comment on the map, that would help us take a look at it, because we would have to present that to the decision makers as other feedback that we received. Because these are properties, David, that we hadn't talked about, correct? I just want to make sure. We have not talked about those. So we're open, but what I would suggest is if you could put those comments on the map for the link, that would help us out, so that we're not taking the comments in the Facebook, and we have in the Facebook comments, we have it all in the map. That would help us out a lot. At this point, it would be something we would need to take a look at. And we'll, Flynn and David are saying we'll reach out to you and get a little bit more information on that, so we have a better understanding of what that looks like moving forward, and then we can make sure we have your comment captured correctly. All right. Oh, we got two more. Oh, as always, it's like, I love it. Who first?
My general question, so if we've already submitted a comment, say, about the business statement, but notice it's not in the draft business statement, do you want us to resubmit the comment on the map, or is there a way to find out
Like, why? Yeah. The vision statement, okay, so the question was, I submitted a comment on the vision statement, but I'm not seeing it reflected on the map. Do I need to make the comment again? I know the vision has been kind of an evolving thing, which is actually great, because that's an important thing. That's the overarching statement of what the city aspires to be. And so normally we kind of do that up front, but there's been a lot of conversation and interest and re-interest in the vision statement. So it's, I think it's one of those things where we're still working with staff and council as to where that goes. So if you wouldn't mind making the comment again, we'd really appreciate, we have it. I can show you all the 12 million comments we've got. But yes, if it's important to you, if you wouldn't mind doing it again, we would appreciate it, because then it's reiterated. And then what we're hoping to do is in the next several months kind of formalize that process about what the vision looks like and how we're getting to the end of it. Because it's gotten a little bit more of a life and gotten a little bit bigger as we've been going through the general plan. So we appreciate you doing that again, if you wouldn't mind. All right, are we bringing it home?
Yeah, so I was able to attend 3 of the housing meetings that we had across the city. And there's a lot of discussion about community rooms. And I know we're focused on housing here, but I think it's crucial when we're looking at tenants not being able to organize, especially because they're not property owners, and given a voice to be able to speak about what their issues are, especially in the city. So I'm wondering,
Understood. Okay. So the question is, we have a gentleman that's attended several of the listening sessions for the housing element that we were talking about, that staff recently conducted in the last month or so. And the question was what the city is doing about looking at providing community rooms in those areas, because it is hard. And we saw that comment too, like just services, period. You know, a grocery store, other things, you know, making sure you have access to transit in areas so you don't have to always come to downtown or the, you know, center of the city to get the services. And so while the housing element focuses on the actual housing in and of itself, like you acknowledged, we have written down all of those other things because they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, you need to have housing, but you need to have the services. So because it's a focused update, you know, we'll have some goals and policies, and we have a holding bin, if you will, of things that need to get addressed in the open space element when that gets updated, and that would be part of it. So we're gathering all this information, and we're looking at it in the light of, you know, you have a social justice commission, we're looking at distribution, there's a lot of things that are probably gonna evolve. We talked about this with the affordable housing subcommittee with council members too. And so there's an awareness of all of this. We kind of have to go, okay, now we've got the information, what do we do with it? Because the scope of this project is here, and we've gotten this valuable feedback, now where does that go? So that's kind of the next step, would you say, is kind of figuring out what to do with it. So keep us honest, you know, we've got it, and this is kind of the first step, and there's an acknowledgement that there's more discussions that need to be had about these things. All right, you guys ready to take a break and look at the maps in the back? Well, thank you all for joining us. We are all going to be here. What we have set up for tonight, if you so choose, the 4 maps that are on the kind of left side of the wall and the vision statement, if you want to handwrite comments on those maps, you are more than welcome to do that, or write a sticky and stick it up. It's the proposed map with the changes. It's the changes only up there. Essentially, it's the same exercise you would do online. So you can choose to say, thank you this evening, I've got other things to do and I'm gonna go home and do it online, or you can provide your comments here. We'll be in the back and we can answer more questions, and I know there were more specifics where we could actually pull up the map and look at things, and so we can do that in the back as well. So with that, I thank all of you for coming tonight and participating online, and yeah, please comment and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.